Welcome to the Grand Theft World podcast, hosted and sponsored by GrandTheftWorld.com. It's May 15th, 2022. This is episode 80. And tonight we got a long show card. We're going to be here for the next 6 hours broadcasting live, distilling the past week of news and seeing what we can get out of the stuff that made through the censorship filters out to the public, what we can discern about world events, current events nationally. We have all sorts of things going on. We're going to talk about things like Rand Paul. Is he an ogre? Is he a hero? He cut off $40 billion in aid to Ukraine that was set to go over there.
My oath of office is to the U.S. Constitution, not to any foreign nation. And no matter how sympathetic the cause, my oath of office is to the national security of the United States of America. We cannot save Ukraine by dooming the U.S. economy. This bill under consideration would spend $40 billion. This is the second spending bill for Ukraine in 2 months, and this bill is 3 times larger than the first. Our military aid to Ukraine is nothing new, though. Since 2014, the United States has provided more than $6 billion in security assistance to Ukraine, in addition to the $14 billion Congress authorized just a month ago. If this bill passes, the U.S. will have authorized roughly $60 billion in total spending for Ukraine. For those who say this is not enough, for those of you in this chamber who say that our military spending is never enough, let's put $60 billion into perspective. According to Elias Youssef, a security assistant at the Stimson Center, Kiev would become the largest yearly recipient of U.S. military aid of the past 2 decades. Except for the top 5 countries, $60 billion is more than every other country in the world spends on their entire military expenditures. If this gift to Ukraine passes, our total aid to Ukraine will almost equal the entire military budget of Russia. And it's not as if we have that money lying around. We will have to borrow that money from China to send it to Ukraine.
Why would he do something like that? Well, from a position of a learned person, you might see that foreign policy, foreign aid kind of works like this in these situations. One government of rich people steals from their tax-paying poor people, and they send it to another government, and it gets dispersed by rich people over there and never reaches the people intended for help. That's why someone like Rand Paul might step up and say, no bueno, we don't want that. It's not good for America. It's not even good for the people we're trying to help. It's going to enrich a bunch of people and contractors and NGOs that are kind of behind making that situation a quagmire in the first place.
So again, they gave $40 billion. They're giving $40 billion to the military-industrial complex under the guise of helping people in Ukraine. Just like we were helping people in Iraq, just like we were helping people in Libya, just like we're helping people in Syria right now by occupying their oil fields, just like we're helping people in Yemen by bombing them and killing them and committing a genocide, just like we're helping people in Somalia, just like we're helping people in Ethiopia by backing terrorists who are overthrowing an elected government, just like we're helping people in Afghanistan. Now we're helping people in Ukraine. Here's Julian Assange to remind us what the actual point of the Libyan war, of the Iraq war, of the Afghanistan war, of now the Ukraine war. Syria. What is the point of all these? This is the point of it.
Because the goal is not to completely subjugate Afghanistan. The goal is to use Afghanistan to wash money out of the tax bases of the United States, out of the tax bases of European countries, through Afghanistan and back into the hands of a transnational security elite. That is the goal, i.e. the goal is to have an endless war, not a successful war.
That's the real point of the Ukraine war, to take money out of the U.S. Treasury and give it to the international, what did he call it? The transnational military state? I don't even know what he calls it. But it's to give it to the military-industrial complex. That's what this is all about.
The next story that we're going to cover tonight throughout one of the big feature focuses is our friend Fauci. He's been MIA for a while. He's back on the scene. Apparently, he's gotten caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Hand in the cookie jar, like a thief getting caught, that type of metaphor. How to do that? Well, he took a bunch of grants that might prove to be a conflict of interest. And so while Americans were weighing their future and their fears based on the words coming out of Fauci's mouth, no one was talking about these conflicts of interest, which were known on one side, but not known on the side that was getting denied their informed consent.
And Anthony Fauci and the NIH are public servants with no concern other than your health and the well-being of the United States of America. What? You think they'd be distracted by money and payments and kickbacks? Then you're a conspiracy theorist. Let's have a little look at this story. This is from someone called Adam Andrzejewski from Open the Books. Open the Books is a non-profit, non-partisan, charitable organisation who capture and post all disclosed spending at every level of government, federal, state and local. In 2021, they filed 47,000 Freedom of Information Act requests. They sound to me like pretty terrific individuals. Let's have a look at this. Last year, the National Institutes of Health, Anthony Fauci's employer, doled out $30 billion in government grants to roughly 56,000 recipients. That largesse of taxpayer money buys a lot of favour and clout within the scientific research and healthcare industries. Do you find it hard to appreciate when there is government spending that it's your money? I sometimes forget that. I sometimes forget that in my case, because I earn good money, like half my time I'm working for the government, whether I voted for them or not, whether I trust them or not, whether I like them or not. Half my time I work for them. You, depending on your financial status, will be spending either 25% of your time or 30% or 40 or 50% of your time working for the government. So I hope you like and trust them because it's your money they're spending. However, in our breaking investigation, we found hundreds of millions of dollars in payments also flow the other way. What? That's weird. Back to us then. These are royalty payments from third-party payers, think pharmaceutical companies, back to the NIH and other individual NIH scientists. We estimate that between fiscal years 2010 and 2020, more than $350 million in royalties were paid by third parties to the agency and NIH scientists who are credited as co-inventors. So the NIH awards grants to different organizations, 56,000 recipients, and some of those recipients, primarily, according to this, pharmaceutical companies, award grants right back. That's an interesting carousel made of dollar bills and favours, huh? Because those payments enrich the agency and its scientists, each and every royalty payment could be a potential conflict of interest and needs disclosure. No, there couldn't be conflicts of interest. Anthony Fauci, as we remember, he's just saying, don't you remember the late night talk show appearances? Anthony Fauci, the badges, the tea towels, the fun, the honour, the parades, the celebration. Why? Because this guy is transparent. This guy isn't in it for the money. This guy is beyond all that, beyond reproach. I ain't a kid. So I don't need people to be perfect. I know people are flawed. I know people because I am a people. And I have in me greed and self-centeredness and all sorts of things that I tackle and deal with on a daily basis, recognizing that it's very hard to be perfect. However, at the moment, I am not running the NIH. And if I am, I'm going to expect a level of scrutiny that I'm not currently subject to. Recently, our organisation at openthebooks.com forced NIH to disclose over 22,100 royalty payments totalling nearly $134 million paid to the agency and nearly 1,700 NIH scientists. These payments occurred during the most recently available period, September 2009 to September 2014. The assumption would be that those payments are ongoing, but the evidence isn't available because there are regulations that prevent you from going, hey, did you earn anything, for example, in 2020 or 2021? You can't look at that information.
Another story we're going to talk about tonight is there was a COVID summit past week. So not the FDA, CDC, WHO, but rather early treatment doctors from around the world, people who were pioneers in trying to keep people alive at a time when these other world entities seemed to get giggles out of making people reach their demise.
Welcome to the May 11th, 2022 press conference of the Global COVID Summit.
We're a group of physicians and medical scientists from around the world that stand for truth and integrity in science.
We declare doctors should not be blocked from providing life-saving treatment. Had early treatment not been blocked, millions would be alive today.
This is an established fact. There's no question about this. Whether FDA agrees with it or not, it doesn't matter. They can lie about the science, they can agree with the science. It doesn't change the science.
Never have I seen a policy to say, let's hedge on the side of doing nothing compared to doing something with safe and effective drugs.
We declare the state of a national emergency which facilitates corruption and extends the pandemic should be immediately terminated. The emergency phase of the pandemic is over. We declare the emergency is ended, and only doctors can declare that.
We declare that medical privacy should never again be violated. All travel and social restrictions must cease. All personal data must be expunged from non-HIPAA compliant databases.
We declare the end of the First Amendment violations, medical censorship. I hope that we will reach these important ethical standards in allowing physicians, healthcare providers across various platforms to speak and to share their knowledge, their research openly without censorship.
We all ask that you help us demand change, demand accountability, demand integrity, demand respect, and try to rebuild our community.
Another story we're going to talk about tonight would be pandemic treaty, an international pandemic treaty that they're looking at signing. It has to do with WHO, and of course, then Bill Gates, who funds the WHO, becomes boss. It would override national sovereignty across many, many nations, including America. So all of a sudden, it's no longer the constitutional republic that we once had. It could be outsourced to an international entity with non-elected leaders who are not locally accountable. And at the end of the day, it goes back to a couple super billionaires like Bill Gates and his eugenics crowd.
So what exactly is in this treaty? It is an agreement on pandemic preparedness that would grant the WHO absolute power over global biosecurity, such as the power to implement digital identities, vaccine passports, mandatory vaccinations, travel restrictions globally, standardized medical care, and so much more. But let's be specific about what this treaty does, because it gives enormous powers to the WHO in the case of a pandemic. But it also allows for just about anything to be called a pandemic. Quote, this treaty includes 190 countries and would be legally binding. The treaty defines and classifies what is considered a pandemic, and this could consist of broad classifications, including an increase in cancers, heart conditions, strokes, etc. If a pandemic is declared, the WHO takes over the global health management of the pandemic. What's more here, the WHO would be in full control over what gets called a pandemic. They could dictate how doctors can respond, which drugs can and cannot be used, or which vaccines are approved. And this is for the entire globe, not just one country. And it gets better, because at the same moment that this treaty is being drafted, guess who's back? Bill Gates has announced the creation of a pandemic germ team that will monitor sovereign nations and decide when they need to suspend civil liberties, force people to wear masks, and to close borders. According to Gates, the global team will be made up of some 3,000 disease experts under WHO purview and will receive around $1 billion per year in funding. Look at this, quote, the team's disease monitoring experts would look for potential outbreaks. Once it spots one, germ should have the ability to declare an outbreak and work with national governments and the World Bank to raise money for the response very quickly. Product development experts would advise governments and companies on the highest priority drugs and vaccines, end quote. The WHO has further stated that countries disobeying regulations dictated by their organization through their pandemic treaty may need to be sanctioned. So, are the claims that by signing onto this treaty that Joe Biden and Boris Johnson in the UK and Justin Trudeau in Canada and other Western leaders, that they're handing off sovereignty to the WHO? Is that true? Well, it seems to be, and it doesn't seem to be understated at all, but there is good news here, because none of this is truly binding. None of this here cannot be undone. Strong leaders in this country, men and women who believe in the rights of the people not to be led by unelected and unaccountable cronies and globalists, can say no. They can refuse, and without the power and the backing of the United States, none of this has teeth to it. That is fact. And that is why it is our responsibility as Americans to stand against this, not just on our own behalf, but on behalf of people around the world who will be rolled over by this new world order.
Finally, one of the other bigger stories that we're going to talk about tonight is the title story from tonight's episode. It has to do with the controlled demolition of our food supply, not just in America, kind of around the world. People are now finding food as a scarce resource. In America currently, there's like a baby formula crisis. Has America been sending baby formula out of the country? Is that part of what creates this crisis, this so-called foreign aid that goes and doesn't even necessarily reach the people it's intended for, but oftentimes gets hijacked by organized crime, who then sells it off to the people who can afford to pay a couple extra bucks to feed their kids?
My friends, welcome. There's so much going on with respect to the controlled demolition of our food supply that I scarcely know where to begin this report. In fact, I just realized that it's that itself which is the most important thing to share. That when we step back from these individual things that I'll talk about, that if we pretend we were some alien species in a faraway space watching humanity, we would be scratching our heads and asking ourselves right now, and rightly so, understandably so, what the hell is going on down there right now? It seems like they've completely given up all hope of continuing as a species. They're just stopping their food production. They're not planting their crops in many cases, or they're changing to different things at the last second. They're not fertilizing the crops they do have. The greenhouses that they spent tons of money and years building are empty now because of some economics reason they give for it. I mean, we can give reasons for these things, but they give reasons for killing off their pigs because of Japanese encephalitis, killing off their fish because of bacterial outbreaks at the fisheries. California's not even bothering to stock the lakes and rivers this year. They're just giving up. Texas is killing off their deer. Other places too, killing off their deer because of chronic wasting disease. Northern Ireland killing off their sheep because of cow farts, basically, because of CO2. What is wrong with humanity? They're killing off hundreds of millions of chickens, as we've talked about, as lots of people are now talking about, because of bird flu. But not only that, they're immediately firing all of the workers, hundreds of workers at these factories. This is an example I'll look at today, where a single PCR test, one PCR test, immediately they turned around, management killed off millions of birds and then fired hundreds of workers that have been there. There's no plan to restart that capacity, obviously. That's just gone now. And they've been investing money in AI to weigh the eggs and all this stuff, but they got the memo. It's time to turn off animal agriculture at this point. Animals are dirty and dangerous. We're figuring out they have antibiotic-resistant superbugs, and it's just too dangerous to continue keeping animals now. In fact, the mainstream media is even running cover stories now saying it is true that there have been hundreds of fires at these food processing plants, but it's a conspiracy theory. It did happen, but it's a conspiracy theory. It's literally what they're saying. In fact, this article has the Ice Age farmer food supply spontaneous combustion map on it. It's conspiracy theories. The fires did happen, though.
So there's a lot of things to unwrap tonight, unravel, dig into, do deep dives on, get the documents out. Let's see what the source materials and evidence of such stories are. And we're going to kick it off tonight, as always, with Luke Radowski from We Are Change and bestpoliticalshirts.com. Let's go to Luke from his report from earlier today and see what's going on this week from his perspective.
Human beings are now in such a state of hyper complexity where everything is integrated, everything is connected, that there is no individuality, there is no original thought. You become an amalgamation of everything that you've heard and been exposed to, but you really do nothing. The jury's out. Wake up, do hard work, learn about yourself, turn the shit off, eat a carrot every now and then, and life is going to be pretty good for you. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but you'll have the built-in tools and you'll begin to learn about your higher self. And to me, the hero's journey is the journey of learning about yourself and using those tools to overcome the external circumstances that you face. Shift focus from a person that is always looking out for answers to a person that is looking in for answers, and then using those answers to then change the material world around them with their choices. Because everything is designed today to keep you from knowing what you are. You are the energy source that feeds your own demise. Social media doesn't exist if you're not there. Everything is designed to fulfill these physical desires. So you give your energy to feed your own destruction, and then you complain about the very thing that you're feeding. When it's always you. You're the one. It's not there if you're not there. You feed it. You are feeding, and you are arming your own captors.
We're living in a world where the best way to warn about the dangers of social media is social media.
What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happen. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions. We can get into the show, we can share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man.